I watched my husband kill our newborn child with his own hands. I thought that was the worst pain I would ever feel. So I stabbed myself in the heart right in front of him. But death wasn't the end of our story. Because when he opened his eyes again, time had gone backwards. And now the man who destroyed me must relive my death again and again. Until the day he finally saves me. The temple bells rang across the royal capital. Their sound rolled through the marble courtyards of the palace like distant thunder. Nobles gathered beneath the stone pillars, their silk robes whispering as they waited for the spring blessing. I stood at the top of the temple stairs. White robes brushed the marble beneath my feet. Silver chains hung from the staff in my hand, each tiny bell chiming softly whenever the wind passed. Below me stood the most powerful people in the kingdom. Alphas in embroidered court uniforms, betas who governed trade and law, and scattered among them, a few Omegas, guarded and watched carefully like rare treasures. I had never belonged to that world. I was the pontific of the goddess, chosen when I was 15 after the divine oracle awakened within me. The goddess did not care about designations. Alpha, Beta, Omega. None of it mattered to her. But the court still cared. They always would. I lowered my gaze and began the prayer. May the goddess bless this kingdom and calm the storms within our hearts. My voice echoed across the courtyard. As the prayer ended, nobles bowed respectfully. But one man did not. I felt his presence immediately. Heavy, dominant, sharp enough to cut through the air itself. When I looked up, he stood near the front of the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered. His dark military coat carried the insignia of the Northern Territories. Duke Arthur, the most feared alpha in the royal court. His scent reached me even across the courtyard. Iron, smoke, cold winter wind. It was overwhelming, like standing too close to a wildfire. And yet his golden eyes stared directly at me with open skepticism. He did not bow. Of course he didn't. Everyone knew the Duke had no patience for gods. When the ceremony ended, I walked down the temple steps. One by one, nobles approached for blessings. Then the crowd parted. Heavy boots struck the marble. Arthur stopped in front of me. Up close, the pressure of his alpha pheromones was stronger. The guards behind him instinctively stepped back. But I didn't move. He studied me slowly. You're the goddess's oracle, he said. His voice was deep and calm, but something dangerous hid beneath it. Yes. His gaze sharpened. You're also an Omega. The nobles around us shifted uncomfortably. I smiled gently. That is also true. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if waiting for embarrassment. But there was none. I had never been ashamed of what I was. Arthur exhaled softly through his nose. You don't smell like most Omegas. I blinked. That may be because I spend most of my time praying. A faint scoff escaped him. Or because you're lying. I reached forward and placed my hand against his sleeve. Gasps echoed around us. Touching an alpha without permission was improper. But the moment my palm brushed his arm, warmth surged through my chest. Pain. Old scars. Too many wounds hidden beneath pride and armor. You've been injured many times, I said quietly. Arthur grabbed my wrist instantly. His grip was strong, but not painful. You can sense that, he asked. Yes. His gaze searched my face, looking for deception. Finding none. After a moment, he released me. Ridiculous. He turned and walked away. But just before he disappeared into the crowd, he glanced back. Months passed. Then something strange began to happen. Duke Arthur kept appearing. At the temple gardens. At evening prayers. Standing silently at the back of the sanctuary while candles burned in quiet rows. At first he said nothing. He only watched. His presence filled the temple with the heavy scent of alpha dominance. Most people avoided him. I didn't. One night I found him sitting beside the lotus pond. Moonlight reflected across the water. You shouldn't wander here alone, he said without looking at me. I sat beside him. The temple is sacred ground. He gave a quiet laugh. Swords enter sacred places more often than you think. I tilted my head. Then perhaps they come searching for peace. That made him glance at me. His eyes studied my face as if trying to solve a puzzle. Why aren't you afraid of me? He asked. I am. His brow furrowed. But fear doesn't mean someone should be alone. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly his gaze drifted to the water. You're strange, he muttered. Most people say that. After that night, Arthur stopped pretending his visits were accidental. He came openly. Often. Sometimes wounded. Sometimes exhausted. Sometimes just silent. I treated his injuries when he allowed it. The first time I cleaned a deep cut across his ribs, his scent thickened in the small chamber. Alpha pheromones, strong, restless, instinctively territorial. It should have frightened me. Instead, it made my heart ache. "You don't react," he said quietly. "To what?" "My scent." I smiled slightly. "It smells like winter." He stared at me. Then something in his expression changed. Slowly. Dangerously. After that, he started bringing things when he visited. Rare herbs. Northern tea. Warm furs when winter arrived. I never asked why. But the temple servants whispered. The Duke was obsessed. And perhaps they were right. Because the way Arthur looked at me changed. At first it was curiosity. Then interest. Then something darker. Something possessive. Something that wrapped around my heart before I realized what was happening. By the time I understood, I had already fallen in love with him. The rumors began shortly after. Whispers in court. The Duke visited the temple too often. The Omega Pontific had seduced him. The goddess's servant had forgotten his vows. Arthur ignored every rumor. One evening he came to my chamber and closed the door behind him. "You're leaving the temple," he said. I blinked in surprise. "Why?" "You'll live in my estate." "That isn't proper." His expression hardened. "I don't care about proper." I looked at him quietly. "What do you want from me, Arthur?" For the first time since we met. He hesitated. Then his voice dropped. "Stay with me." Just 2 words. But the intensity behind them made my chest tighten. I nodded. Because the truth was simple. I wanted him too. Happiness in the royal court never lasts. The accusations came suddenly. Letters appeared. Witnesses stepped forward. They claimed I had been meeting secretly with Arthur's enemies. They claimed the child growing inside me was not his. The court erupted. Alphas filled the hall with aggressive pheromones. Arthur stood at the center of it all. Silent. Cold. Watching me. "Arthur," I whispered. "Enough." His voice cut through the chaos. My heart dropped. "You betrayed me." "No," I said immediately. "I would never." Silence. His golden eyes were empty. "You won't die." Hope flickered weakly inside me. Then he spoke again. "But you will be punished." The storm outside the estate raged the night our child was born. Rain struck the windows like thrown stones. I held the tiny newborn against my chest. His scent was soft. Sweet. A mixture of my Omega warmth and Arthur's sharp Alpha strength. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Arthur would understand. He had to. The door opened. Arthur stepped inside. Sword already drawn. My heart stopped. "Arthur?" He walked slowly toward the bed. His face was expressionless. My arms tightened around the baby. "He's yours," I whispered. Arthur said nothing. The sword rose. And in a single motion, he killed our child. My scream shattered the silence. Blood stained the sheets. Arthur stood over the bed, breathing heavily. "This," he said coldly, "is your punishment." Something inside my chest collapsed. Completely. I stared at the tiny body in my arms. Then I looked at Arthur. The man I loved. The man who destroyed everything. A soft laugh escaped my lips. "So this is the end." Before he could move, I grabbed the dagger hidden beneath the pillow and drove it into my heart. Arthur lunged forward. "No!" But it was already too late. The world blurred. Darkness closed in. The last thing I saw was Arthur dropping to his knees beside me, reaching for me. Too late. Hours later, the truth exploded across the palace. The conspirators were captured. The letters were forged. The witnesses were bribed. Noah had never betrayed him. The child had been Arthur's. A divine voice thundered across the sky. The goddess appeared above the palace in radiant fury. "You destroyed the one I cherished most." Arthur collapsed to his knees. "You will suffer what he suffered," the goddess declared. "You will return again and again until the day you save both the child and the one you destroyed." Blinding light engulfed the world. Time shattered. And somewhere in the past, Arthur opened his eyes again. Back at the day he first met Noah. The temple bells rang. The sound slammed into Arthur's skull like a hammer. His eyes snapped open. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Blood. The memory of blood clung to his hands. Warm. Sticky. His sword cutting through something impossibly small. Noah's scream ripping through the room. Arthur staggered upright. He wasn't in the ducal estate. He wasn't in the chamber where Noah died. He stood in the royal courtyard. Sunlight flooded the marble steps of the temple. Nobles filled the courtyard. The exact same day. The exact same moment. Arthur's heartbeat slammed violently against his ribs. No, that was impossible. Then the temple doors opened, and Arthur saw him. Noah stood at the top of the temple stairs, dressed in white robes, silver staff in his hand. Wind tugged gently at his sleeves, making him look almost unreal against the bright sky. Alive! Arthur's vision blurred. His chest tightened so violently he nearly doubled over. Alive! No blood. No dagger in his heart. No lifeless child. Just Noah, calm and gentle, beginning the blessing prayer exactly as he had that day. Arthur's hands started shaking. The goddess's voice echoed inside his skull. You will return again and again, until the day you save both the child and the one you destroyed. The curse. This was the curse. Arthur dragged a hand over his face. His fingers trembled violently. He forced them still. Control. He needed control. Because if this truly was the past, then the nightmare had not happened yet. Which meant it could still happen again. His stomach twisted violently. The memory of Noah's scream refused to leave him. The prayer ended. Nobles bowed. Arthur didn't move. He couldn't. Noah began walking down the temple stairs. Each step felt like a blade cutting deeper into Arthur's chest. In the previous life, he had walked forward and mocked him. Called him fragile. Weak. The memory made bile rise in his throat. Not this time. This time Arthur forced himself to move first. Heavy boots struck the marble. The nobles parted immediately, instincts reacting to the dominant alpha aura that rolled off him like a storm. Noah looked up as Arthur approached. Their eyes met. Warm brown eyes. Gentle. Trusting. Arthur's chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. Gods. How had he destroyed this person? You're the pontific, Arthur said. His voice came out rougher than intended. Noah blinked slightly. Yes. He smelled the same. Warm. Soft. Omega pheromones like sunlight through silk. Arthur had never noticed before how comforting Noah's scent was. In the previous life he had ignored it. Dismissed it. But now his alpha instincts reacted violently to it. Protect. Guard. Keep close. Arthur clenched his fists behind his back. You're also an Omega, he said. Murmurs spread among the nobles. Noah simply smiled. That is also true. Arthur stared at him. How could someone remain so calm under the gaze of dozens of powerful alphas? You're not afraid of me? Arthur asked. I am. Arthur frowned. You don't look afraid. Noah stepped forward. Before Arthur could react, the Omega gently placed his hand against Arthur's sleeve. The contact sent a shock through Arthur's entire body. Warmth. Softness. Life. Arthur grabbed Noah's wrist instinctively. His grip tightened. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to confirm he was real. You can sense injuries, Noah said softly. Arthur froze. That was exactly what Noah had said before. Every word. The same. Arthur released him immediately. His throat felt tight. If everything was repeating exactly, then the tragedy would repeat too. Unless he stopped it. Arthur turned abruptly and walked away. He couldn't stay another second. If he did, he might grab Noah and never let go. That night Arthur returned to the temple. He hadn't meant to, but his feet carried him there anyway. The moon reflected across the lotus pond in the garden, and Noah sat exactly where Arthur remembered. Arthur stopped several steps away. The Omega looked peaceful, unaware of the nightmare waiting in the future. You shouldn't wander here alone, Arthur said. Noah looked up. Recognition lit his eyes. You came back. Arthur's chest tightened again. Of course Noah said that. He had said it in the previous life too. Arthur sat beside him slowly. You trust people too easily, Arthur muttered. Noah tilted his head. Perhaps. People lie, Arthur said. They betray. They destroy everything you give them. Noah studied him quietly. Then he said something Arthur did not expect. You sound very lonely. Arthur froze. Lonely? The word felt foreign. He had never thought of himself that way. But suddenly the memory of the empty room where Noah died flashed in his mind. Arthur stood abruptly. He couldn't sit here pretending nothing had happened. Not after what he had done. I have work, he said coldly. Noah nodded. Then I hope you return safely. Arthur walked away without responding. But the words followed him all the way back to the palace. The next weeks changed everything. Arthur refused to repeat the mistakes of the previous life. He began quietly dismantling the conspiracy. First, he summoned his intelligence network. Find every noble who has contact with the southern faction, he ordered. Watch them. Record everything. Then he eliminated the weakest conspirators. 2 corrupt ministers lost their positions. A merchant tied to smuggling rings disappeared. A court advisor was suddenly accused of treason. None of them understood why the Duke had turned his attention toward them. Arthur didn't explain. Every piece of the conspiracy had to be removed. Every single one. Because this time Noah would not suffer. But fate did not change as easily as Arthur hoped. One evening Arthur arrived at the temple again. Rain soaked his coat. A deep cut ran across his shoulder. Noah pulled him inside immediately. "You're injured." "It's nothing." Noah ignored the protest and began cleaning the wound. Arthur watched him silently. The gentle Omega focused carefully, brow slightly furrowed. Warm Omega scent filled the small chamber. Arthur's alpha instincts stirred violently. "Mine." The thought appeared before he could stop it. Arthur clenched his jaw. Noah finished bandaging the wound. "There," he said softly. Arthur caught his wrist again. Noah blinked. "What is it?" Arthur stared at him. He had watched this person die. Twice. Once by his own hand. Once in his arms. "I won't let anyone hurt you," Arthur said quietly. Noah smiled. The same trusting smile. "I know." Arthur's chest tightened painfully. "No, you don't. Because the person who hurt you most was me." Months later the palace court gathered again. Arthur stood beside the throne. His gaze scanned the nobles carefully. Every conspirator. Every enemy. Every possible threat. He had removed most of them already. This time nothing would go wrong. Then the doors burst open. A servant stumbled inside. "Your Grace." Arthur's stomach dropped. The pontific collapsed. Arthur moved before the servant finished speaking. The world blurred as he rushed through the palace halls. When he reached Noah's chamber, physicians surrounded the bed. Noah lay pale against the sheets. Arthur's heart stopped. "What happened?" he demanded. "Poison," one physician said grimly. Arthur's vision darkened. Poison? That had never happened in the first timeline. Which meant fate had changed the method. But not the outcome. Arthur rushed to the bed. "Noah." Noah's eyes opened weakly. A faint smile touched his lips. "You came." Arthur grabbed his hand. "You're not dying." Noah's fingers trembled in his grasp. "Arthur." His voice was barely audible. "Don't look so sad." Arthur's throat closed. "Stop talking." "I'm glad," Noah whispered, "that I met you." The hand in Arthur's grip went limp. Silence filled the chamber. Arthur stared down at the still body. For a long time he didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then slowly his shoulders began to shake. Not with grief. With rage. The goddess's voice echoed again in the heavens. "You will return again and again." Light swallowed the world. Arthur closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the temple bells were ringing. And Noah stood at the top of the stairs. Alive. Again. The bells rang again. Arthur didn't flinch this time. The sound rolled across the temple courtyard exactly as it had twice before. Nobles gathered beneath the marble arches. Silks rustled. Guards stood in quiet rows. Everything was the same. Everything always started the same. Arthur stood at the front of the crowd, unmoving. His golden eyes were fixed on the temple doors. He already knew what would happen. They would open. Noah would step out dressed in white. The wind would move his sleeves. And Arthur's chest would tighten like someone had driven a blade through it. The doors opened. There he was. Alive. Again. White robes. Silver staff. Calm eyes that held no memory of the nightmare Arthur carried alone. For a moment Arthur simply stared. 2 deaths. He had watched Noah die twice. The first time by his own cruelty. The second time by poison that should never have existed. Arthur's fingers curled slowly into fists. Fate. Something was forcing the same ending no matter what he changed. But this time, Arthur would break it. Noah began the blessing prayer, voice soft and steady. Arthur barely heard the words. He was already planning. Every move. Every enemy. Every possible threat. The prayer ended. Nobles bowed. Arthur stepped forward before anyone else could approach. Noah's gaze lifted. Recognition softened his expression. "You returned," Noah said gently. The same words. Every time. Arthur stopped in front of him. This close, Noah's scent surrounded him immediately. Warm. Comforting. Omega pheromones like sunlight through fresh linen. Arthur's alpha instincts surged violently. Protect. Claim. Never lose him again. Arthur forced the instincts down. "You're the pontific," he said. Noah nodded. "And you're Duke Arthur." Arthur stared at him. "You remember me. You are difficult to forget." Something inside Arthur twisted painfully. In the previous timelines, he had dismissed that warmth. Now it felt unbearable. Arthur reached forward and caught Noah's wrist. The Omega blinked in surprise. Arthur? Arthur leaned closer. Listen carefully, he said quietly. You will leave the temple. Noah frowned. Why? You'll live in my estate. Murmurs spread through the nobles behind them. Noah looked startled. That isn't appropriate. I don't care. Arthur's voice hardened. Noah. The Omega stilled. Arthur rarely used his name this early in the timeline. Stay with me. Noah studied his face carefully. Then he smiled softly. All right. Arthur's breath caught. Just like that. Trust. Again. Every time Noah trusted him. Arthur released his wrist slowly. This time he would not destroy that trust. The third life moved quickly. Arthur didn't waste time. He began tearing apart the court's hidden factions immediately. 3 ministers were arrested within the first month. 2 generals were quietly replaced. A noble family connected to the Southern conspiracy lost its influence overnight. Arthur's enemies grew nervous. They could feel something shifting, but none of them understood why. Meanwhile, Noah moved into the ducal estate. The palace servants were shocked. An Omega living openly in the Duke's residence was already scandalous. An Omega who was also the pontific of the goddess was unheard of. Arthur ignored the gossip. Every night he returned to the estate and found Noah waiting in the garden. Sometimes reading, sometimes praying, sometimes simply watching the stars. One evening Arthur approached quietly. You should sleep earlier, he said. Noah looked up from the stone bench. You're late again. Arthur frowned slightly. You waited? Yes. Arthur stood there silently. Something warm settled in his chest. Dangerous. Comforting. You shouldn't, he muttered. Noah tilted his head. Why? Arthur looked away. Because I might not come back. Noah smiled. You always do. Arthur didn't answer. Because twice already. Noah had been the one who didn't come back. Weeks passed. Then months. Arthur's control over the court grew absolute. Enemies disappeared before they could act. Plots were crushed before they formed. Arthur believed he had finally changed the future. Then one morning Noah approached him in the study. Arthur immediately noticed the faint sweetness in the air. His head snapped up. Omega scent. Stronger than usual. Noah stood quietly by the door. I have something to tell you. Arthur's pulse quickened. He already knew. Even before Noah spoke. I'm pregnant. The words echoed through the room. Arthur stood slowly. In the previous timelines, this moment had always come. And every time it led to disaster. Arthur walked toward Noah carefully. The Omega watched him with calm eyes. You're not surprised, Noah said. Arthur stopped in front of him. I am. But not for the reason Noah believed. Arthur lifted a hand and placed it gently against Noah's stomach. Warm. Alive. His child. Arthur's chest tightened painfully. I won't let anything happen, he said quietly. Noah covered Arthur's hand with his own. I know. Arthur almost laughed. That blind trust again. It terrified him. Because fate had stolen it twice already. The assassination attempt came 3 months later. Arthur expected it. What he didn't expect was Noah stepping between him and the blade. The attack happened during a royal banquet. Music filled the hall. Nobles drank and laughed. Then suddenly a disguised servant lunged forward. A hidden dagger flashed toward Arthur's chest. Arthur moved instantly. But Noah was closer. The Omega stepped forward instinctively. The blade struck deep. Arthur caught Noah as he collapsed. The scent of blood flooded the air. No! Panic ripped through Arthur's chest. Noah's fingers clutched weakly at his coat. You're safe, Noah whispered. Arthur's vision blurred with rage. You idiot, he growled. Why would you do that? Noah smiled faintly. Because I love you. Arthur's heart stopped. The words echoed in his head. Just like the previous timelines. The same confession. Always before the end. No, Arthur said hoarsely. You're not dying again. Noah's hand trembled against Arthur's chest. Arthur. The light in his eyes began to fade. Arthur shook him desperately. Stay awake. But Noah only smiled softly. The same peaceful smile from the other lives. Then his body went still. Arthur froze. For a long moment the entire hall was silent. Then Arthur slowly lifted his head. His golden eyes burned with something far darker than grief. Fate. Fate kept killing Noah. No matter what he changed. No matter how many enemies he destroyed. The outcome stayed the same. Arthur stood up slowly, still holding Noah's body. This time his rage was colder. Sharper. More focused. If fate insisted on playing this game, then Arthur would destroy fate itself. The sky split open with divine light. The goddess's voice thundered once more. You will return again. The world shattered. Arthur closed his eyes. When he opened them, the temple bells were ringing again, and Noah stood at the top of the stairs. Alive. For the fourth time. Arthur exhaled slowly. This time, he would uncover the truth behind the curse. And someone would pay for every death Noah had suffered. The bells rang again. Clear. Cold. Unforgiving. Arthur opened his eyes slowly. The temple courtyard spread before him exactly as it had 3 times before. Marble steps. Silk robes. Nobles whispering beneath carved pillars. And at the top of the temple stairs, Noah. Alive. White robes fluttered in the wind as the Omega raised the silver staff of the goddess. His voice flowed calmly over the courtyard as he began the blessing prayer. Arthur didn't move. Not this time. 3 lives had already been wasted. 3 times fate had stolen Noah from him. First by Arthur's own cruelty. Then by poison. Then by an assassin's blade. Arthur watched Noah carefully. Everything was repeating again. But Arthur had finally understood something during the last regression. Fate wasn't random. Someone had been guiding it. Someone had always been there at the edges of every tragedy. Arthur's golden eyes moved through the crowd slowly, scanning faces, measuring reactions, watching for fear, watching for guilt. This time, he wasn't going to fight blindly. He was going to find the hand behind the knife. The prayer ended. Nobles bowed. Arthur stepped forward. Noah's gaze lifted immediately. Warm recognition softened his eyes. You came back, Noah said. Arthur stopped in front of him. Yes. His voice was quieter this time. Controlled. Careful. Noah studied him curiously. You look different today. Arthur almost smiled. Of course he did. 3 lifetimes of regret could change any man. Arthur reached forward and gently took Noah's hand. Gasps echoed around them. But Arthur ignored the court entirely. You're leaving the temple, he said. Noah blinked. Already? Yes. Noah tilted his head slightly. You sound very certain. Arthur's grip tightened slightly. Because this time I won't make mistakes. Noah didn't understand the meaning behind those words. But he still smiled. Then I'll trust you. Arthur closed his eyes for a brief second. That trust still hurt. The 4th life began differently. Arthur no longer focused only on protecting Noah. He focused on understanding the pattern. In every previous timeline, the conspiracies had shifted slightly. Different methods. Different timing. But the same result. Noah always died. Which meant someone was adapting. Someone was watching events closely enough to adjust their plans each time. Arthur summoned his most loyal spy 3 days after the regression. Find every noble connected to the southern faction, Arthur ordered. That was already done in the previous timelines, the spy replied carefully. Arthur's gaze sharpened. This time you're looking for something else. What? Who benefits from chaos? The spy frowned. Arthur continued. Who gains power every time a noble faction collapses? Silence filled the study. Then understanding slowly appeared in the spy's eyes. The Royal Council. Arthur nodded slowly. Yes. The Royal Council had survived every purge. Every assassination. Every scandal. And one man had always remained untouched. The Prime Minister. Lord Cashin. Meanwhile, Noah moved into the ducal estate once again. Just like the previous lives. But this time Arthur didn't keep his distance. He stayed close. Always. If Noah walked through the gardens, Arthur walked beside him. If Noah prayed in the temple room, Arthur remained at the door. At first Noah found it amusing. You're acting like my guard, Noah said one afternoon. Arthur leaned against the garden pillar beside him. I am your guard. Noah smiled. That's unnecessary. Arthur's gaze darkened. No, it isn't. Noah studied his expression carefully. Then his smile softened. You're worried about something. Arthur didn't answer. Because if he tried to explain the truth, that Noah had already died 3 times, Noah would think he had gone mad. Instead, Arthur said quietly, just stay close to me. Noah nodded without hesitation. All right. Weeks later, the scent changed. Arthur noticed it immediately. Sweet Omega pheromones filled the estate halls. Arthur found Noah standing beside the open window in the study. You know, Noah said softly without turning around. Arthur approached slowly. Yes. Noah smiled faintly. You already knew. Arthur stopped beside him. Pregnancy. Again. Another fragile life growing inside Noah. Another chance for fate to destroy everything. Arthur placed his hand gently over Noah's stomach. His chest tightened painfully. "I won't let anything happen this time," Arthur said quietly. Noah covered Arthur's hand with his own. "You always say that." Arthur froze. "You remember?" Noah shook his head slightly. "No." His smile was soft. "But it feels like something you've said before." Arthur exhaled slowly. Perhaps some part of Noah's soul remembered after all. Arthur finally confirmed his suspicions 2 months later. His spies returned with a report. "The Prime Minister met secretly with the Southern faction last night," the spy said. Arthur's jaw tightened. "And they discussed the Duke's downfall." Arthur laughed softly. So it was him. Lord Cashin had been manipulating events from the shadows. In every timeline, Cashin had spread the rumors, forged the letters, planted assassins. Everything had been designed to destroy Arthur through Noah. Arthur stood slowly. "Prepare the trap." The spy nodded. "When?" Arthur looked toward the window. Snow had begun falling outside. Noah's pregnancy had reached its final weeks. The night the child is born. Because that was always the moment fate struck. And this time, Arthur would be waiting. The storm arrived the night Noah went into labor. Thunder shook the ducal estate. Servants rushed through the halls. Physicians prepared the chamber. Arthur stood outside the door, sword in hand. His eyes never left the corridor. He could feel them coming. The conspirators. Just like the previous timelines. Moments later, shadows moved across the hallway. Masked assassins appeared silently. Arthur stepped forward. "I've been waiting." Steel flashed. The battle erupted instantly. Arthur moved like a storm. 3 assassins fell before they could even strike. Blood splashed across the marble floor. More enemies rushed forward. But Arthur didn't retreat. He cut through them with terrifying precision. Behind him, Noah cried out in pain inside the chamber. Arthur's chest burned with urgency. He had to end this now. The final assassin lunged forward. But before Arthur could strike, another figure stepped from the shadows. Lord Cashin. The Prime Minister smiled calmly. "You finally noticed," he said. Arthur's eyes burned with hatred. "You killed him 3 times. Cashin tilted his head. "How strange. I only remember trying once." Arthur's grip tightened on his sword. "You've been manipulating everything." Cashin laughed softly. "You're too powerful, Duke Arthur. Your fall was necessary for the kingdom." Arthur's voice dropped dangerously low. "You used Noah." "Of course," Cashin said casually. "An Omega beloved by the goddess? What better weapon?" Rage flooded Arthur's vision. But Cashin only smiled wider. "Don't worry," he said. "The child will die soon." Arthur lunged forward. The sword pierced Cashin's chest. The Prime Minister collapsed with a surprised gasp. Arthur turned immediately toward the chamber door. The crying of a newborn echoed from inside. For a moment, Arthur froze. The child was alive. For the first time, the child was alive. Arthur pushed open the door. Noah lay exhausted on the bed, cradling the tiny infant against his chest. Tears slipped down Noah's cheeks as he looked up. "Arthur!" Arthur walked slowly toward them. The nightmare had finally changed. But something still felt wrong. Outside, the storm roared louder. Arthur's chest tightened suddenly. Because he realized something terrifying. The curse wasn't broken yet. And fate had one final move left. The storm had not stopped. Thunder rolled across the sky as if the heavens themselves were watching the ducal estate. Arthur stood beside the bed. Noah lay exhausted against the pillows, their newborn child cradled carefully in his arms. The tiny bundle shifted softly, letting out a faint cry before settling again. Alive! Both of them were alive. For the first time in 4 lifetimes. Arthur stared at them silently. His chest felt tight, as if his heart didn't quite believe what his eyes were seeing. Noah noticed his expression and smiled weakly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Arthur didn't answer. Because in a way, he had. 3 ghosts. 3 versions of Noah that had died in front of him. He stepped closer to the bed slowly. "Let me see him," Arthur said. Noah gently lifted the child. The baby's tiny fingers curled instinctively, and a soft scent filled the room. A mixture of warm omega sweetness and sharp alpha strength. Arthur's throat tightened. His child. The child he had once killed with his own hands. Arthur's fingers trembled slightly as he touched the infant's cheek. The baby stirred but didn't cry. Noah watched him quietly. "You're shaking," Noah murmured. Arthur pulled his hand back quickly. "I'm fine." Noah's gentle eyes studied him carefully. "No, you're not." Arthur looked away. Because if he looked at Noah any longer, He might break. For a brief moment, the room was peaceful. Then Arthur felt it. A shift in the air. Alpha instinct screamed through his body. Danger. Arthur turned toward the window instantly. The glass shattered. A black arrow shot through the room. Arthur moved before he even thought. His body stepped between the bed and the attack. The arrow slammed into his chest. Pain exploded through him. Arthur staggered. Noah's scream filled the chamber. Arthur! The poison-tipped arrow had struck directly into his side, dangerously close to his heart. Arthur gritted his teeth and snapped the shaft. Footsteps echoed outside the chamber. More enemies. Arthur realized the truth instantly. Cashin had never been working alone. The Royal Council had been the true enemy all along. Even dead, Cashin's allies had continued the plan. Kill the child. Destroy Arthur. Arthur pulled the sword from his belt. Blood soaked through his shirt, but he forced himself upright. Noah, he said quietly. Lock the door. Noah's voice trembled. You're bleeding. Lock it. Noah obeyed immediately. Arthur stepped out into the hallway. 6 assassins waited. They rushed him all at once. Arthur moved like a man possessed. The first attacker fell instantly. The second lost his arm. The third collapsed with Arthur's blade through his throat. But the poison was spreading. Arthur's movements slowed. The fourth assassin's sword slashed across his shoulder. Arthur killed him anyway. By the time the final enemy collapsed, Arthur could barely stand. His vision blurred. But the hallway was finally silent. Arthur leaned against the wall. The curse. He understood it now. The goddess had never said Arthur had to survive. Only that Noah and the child had to live. Arthur wiped blood from his mouth. Then he pushed open the chamber door again. Noah looked up immediately. The moment he saw Arthur, his face went pale. Blood covered Arthur's clothes. Arthur! Arthur closed the door behind him carefully. His legs felt heavier with every step. But he still walked toward the bed. Noah set the baby down in the cradle and rushed forward, grabbing Arthur's arm. You're dying. Arthur laughed softly. Yes. No. Noah's voice broke. We can call the physicians. It's too late. Arthur sank slowly onto the edge of the bed. Noah grabbed his face desperately. You promised you wouldn't let anything happen. Arthur looked at him quietly. I didn't. Noah froze. Arthur reached up and gently wiped the tears from Noah's face. I finally kept my promise. Confusion filled Noah's eyes. Arthur exhaled slowly. There's something you deserve to know. Noah shook his head frantically. No. Save your strength. You've already died 3 times. Silence fell. Noah stared at him. Arthur's voice was weak now. But he continued. In the first life, I believed the lies. Arthur's hands trembled. They said you betrayed me. They said the child wasn't mine. His voice cracked. And Arthur swallowed hard. I killed our child in front of you. Noah's eyes widened in horror. You stabbed yourself after that, Arthur continued quietly. And the goddess cursed me. The room felt impossibly still. Arthur forced himself to keep speaking. I returned to this day again and again. Every time you died. Poison. Assassins. Fate. Arthur's gaze softened. And every time, you still loved me. Noah's tears fell silently now. Arthur lowered his head. I don't deserve forgiveness. But before I die, his voice barely held together. I needed you to know the truth. Noah covered his mouth, shaking. Arthur's strength faded quickly now. His body was growing cold. I'm sorry, Arthur whispered. For everything. He closed his eyes. I loved you in every life. Silence filled the room. Then Noah suddenly grabbed Arthur's face with both hands. Look at me. Arthur forced his eyes open. Noah's voice trembled but remained firm. I forgive you. Arthur froze. Noah leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against Arthur's. You're an idiot, Noah whispered through tears. But you're my idiot. Arthur felt something warm break open inside his chest. Relief. Peace. For the first time in 4 lifetimes. Arthur smiled faintly. Then the strength finally left his body. His head dropped against Noah's shoulder. His breathing stopped. The room filled with divine light. The goddess appeared above the cradle. Her expression was calm now. Noah held Arthur's body tightly. Tears streamed down his face. You took him from me, Noah whispered. The goddess looked down at them. He fulfilled the curse. Noah looked up. He saved you. And you forgave him. The divine light brightened. That was the final condition. Noah's breath caught. The goddess lifted her hand. Arthur's body began to glow softly. The wound closed. Color slowly returned to his skin. Arthur's chest rose suddenly with a sharp breath. His eyes opened. Alive. Arthur stared at the ceiling in confusion. Then Noah tackled him into a desperate embrace. You idiot. Arthur blinked. Noah? The baby began crying loudly in the cradle. Noah laughed through tears. Arthur slowly wrapped his arms around him. For the first time since the curse began, the future was finally theirs, and the cycle of death was over. If you loved this emotional roller coaster, hit subscribe to join the adventure. What should my next story be? Drop your ideas. I might make it real.